Recently, our cultural authority figures, the people who decide what we're supposed to think and what we're supposed to do and what our values and goals and aspirations are supposed to be, have become very alarmed by a perverse and dangerous new trend among young women in particular. Of course, I'm not talking about the trend where young women have their breasts removed and then start injecting themselves with testosterone so that their hair falls out and they grow beards and they become infertile. The gatekeepers are not concerned about that trend at all. If anything, they're worried that the trend isn't even more popular than it already is. No, instead, they're deeply worried about women who choose the so-called trad wife lifestyle. Over the past couple of years, a growing number of women have started posting TikTok videos describing and documenting their day-to-day existence as trad wives, quote unquote. What is a trad wife? Well, she is a woman who stays home to take care of the house, takes care of the children while her husband goes to work. She does most of the cooking and the cleaning. She handles the lion's share of the domestic labor while relying on her husband to be the provider and breadwinner. In other words, she is just a normal woman doing what many millions of other normal women have done before her. Which is why my only objection really to the trad wife trend is that we're calling it a trend and we're giving it a cutesy name and a hashtag. That's my only problem with it. My wife would fit the description of a quote-unquote trad wife, but not because she's taking part in a TikTok trend. We've been living this way for 10 years. And I wouldn't really call it a lifestyle either, but rather a system that works for us, just as it has worked for the majority of families all over the world since the dawn of human civilization. Even before the industrial age and the advent of the modern 9-to-5 job, before that, the phrase or the term stay-at-home mom didn't exist. Still, even then, most families featured a man who would go out, whether to the fields to farm or the forest to hunt or later to the office to earn a paycheck, and a woman who stays in the home to care for the children. This is a very standard arrangement. The women on TikTok aren't inventing a trend, but rather they're partaking in a way of life that is ancient and enduring and battle-tested. But that's not how the left sees it. As an article on FoxNews.com reports, quote, donning elaborate dresses, fastening an apron around their waist, and popping in their finest pearl earrings, or at least some iteration of pearls, for another round of household chores or cooking, more and more young women are following in the footsteps of the quintessential mid-century housewife, thanks to the latest TikTok trend. But while some women are eager to shirk all the hustle and bustle of today's corporate world and channel Barbara Billingsley as June Cleaver, others are none too happy with the trend. Quote, the new trend for submissive women has a dark heart and history, reads one headline from The Guardian. An article from Hype Bay slapped the videos as disturbing, writing that they, quote, typically feature a cis-straight white woman longing for the 50s, an era where some women could opt out of participating in the corporate working world and be stay-at-home mothers instead. And a third from Grazia magazine accused the trend of, quote, romanticizing an era where sexism and racism ruled. We can also add a recent CNN article which calls trad wives, otherwise known as housewives or stay-at-home moms, a, quote, fringe subculture. Meanwhile, a piece by Insider says that many of these women are promoting white supremacist views. This was the argument made this week in a video by a left-wing media organization called Novara Media. A woman named Ash Sarkar argues that trad wives are really just agents of a far-right political agenda. Here she is.
Though the idea of women being confined to the home while men do things like go outside and work isn't exactly new, the image of 1950s suburban domesticity has been given a new lease of life by the gals on TikTok.
Can you imagine me, the wife of that boorish, brainless madame?
Some younger millennials and Zoomers have decided to embrace living la vida casserole, dedicating themselves to cooking, cleaning, and child rearing while their husbands or boyfriends, chop firewood or go to their job in human resources. And look, I'm not saying there's anything inherently degrading about being a mum or making nice meals. I like cooking elaborate dinners. For that matter, my boyfriend does too. But the tradwife trend isn't just a way to talk about the experience of being a woman and doing domestic labour. It's saying that being a woman or expressing your femininity most fully means doing all the domestic labour. Men and women are meant to have rigidly distinct roles in the home, in their relationships, and crucially, in economic activity. So this isn't just about personal choice or individual preferences. It's advancing a right-wing political ideology and dressing it up as a lifestyle. So why is this important? 3 things. These women are often really young, in their 20s, and they're preaching the values of submitting to a husband to an audience of other young women. The tradwife trend doesn't exist in isolation. It's linked to deeply regressive political and social movements such as Christian and white nationalism and anti-feminism.
Feminism is an ideology which cannot be defended by feminists.
It's part of a wider shift of young people being dissatisfied with neoliberalism and wanting social change.
Well, she's right about that last point. Not any of the rest of it, but the last point anyway. But before we flesh that out, let's consider a few other points. First, you see how stigmatization is perhaps the left's most common and useful tool. Always has been. I mean, even as they claim that they want people to be free to live their lives without judgment, the truth is that they have a very rigid idea about what sorts of lifestyles should be embraced. And the standard is very simple, actually. It's not complicated. We should celebrate any and all lifestyles that would not be traditionally considered normal. Okay? That's the one rule. So live how you want, just don't be normal. That's why they use a term like fringe subculture to describe a housewife in an apron who would, but they would never put such a label on a man in a wig and a skirt standing up to pee in the women's restroom. He's not part of a fringe subculture. Instead, a 25-year-old woman with 2 kids and a husband baking a casserole, she's the fringe weirdo, the degenerate pervert. You know, it seems for Lent this year, the left is giving up all morality and common sense, but you don't have to do the same. You can choose today to strengthen your faith in spite of this broken world through prayer, meditation, and fasting. Join me and thousands of others on Hallow, the #1 Christian prayer app in the U.S. As Christians, we're called to abstain from luxuries during Lent and instead more deeply embrace our faith. Hallow is here to help me maintain that promise and a daily prayer routine with all the time, but especially until Easter, and it can help you do the same. Download the app for free at hallow.com/Matt Walsh. You can set prayer reminders. You can track your progress along the way as well. If you're not sure where to start, well, you can check out Father Mike Schmitz's Bible in a Year podcast, available on the Hallow app for brief daily Bible readings and reflections. Or you can pray alongside Mark Wahlberg, Jim Caviezel, even some world-class athletes. With Hallow, you can customize a personal prayer plan that works for you. Listen anywhere you are with downloadable offline sessions as well. Stay rooted in your faith and your values during this season of Lent. Get an exclusive 3-month free trial at hallow.com/Matt Walsh. That's hallow.com/Matt Walsh. Now, if that same woman was doing all the same things, but happened to actually be a man, then she, or he in this case, would be revered as a bold and powerful woman daring to live her life as she wishes. The problem with the actual real woman living this way is that she, again, is normal. And while they shame normalcy as perverse and they treat perversion as normal, they somehow have succeeded in convincing many conservatives to not respond in kind, as we should. So they will openly call stay-at-home moms a fringe subculture, while insisting that we must never use such language to describe lifestyles that are actually degenerate. And again, many conservatives willingly play along with this. They willingly play by this rule. The left accuses the tradwife of engaging in a political act. But the truth is that, what they're really angry about is they're angry that she isn't engaging in a political act. She's simply living in a way that is healthy and traditional, and she's prioritizing her family. She is not turning her entire existence into a political statement. She is focused on things deeper and more meaningful than that. And that is what infuriates them. Remember that these are people who've structured their whole lives around opposing traditional values. They're not even pursuing happiness or fulfillment or meaning. They'll settle for misery so long as their misery is a protest against the value systems they despise. Except that ultimately their misery only confirms and supports that very same value system. And that's where the woman in the video had it right, I think. People are deeply dissatisfied with the life that leftism has given them. These so-called tradwives, they grew up in a society that told them that men and women are the same, that we ought to have exactly identical roles in society, that it's demeaning, it's oppressive to prioritize raising children and caring for your family, that fulfillment is found in serving your boss rather than your spouse, that a strong and independent woman is one who depends on her employer rather than her husband. They were raised in a culture that takes all of these ideas for granted. They were socialized and conditioned to accept them as gospel truth, and many of them did for a time, and then discovered that it was all a lie. You know, the most basic problem with leftism is that it is just hollow at its core. It doesn't have an answer, or at least not a satisfying answer, to the question of why we're here on this earth and what we're supposed to be doing with our time. This ambiguity, this lack of answers, is presented to us as freedom. But it's the freedom of being lost in the woods, the freedom of having no idea where to go or why. And that's not freedom, that's abandonment. And this is what has happened to multiple generations of Americans. They've been brought down a path with promises of happiness and fulfillment around the corner, and then they were just left there, abandoned. This is the source of much of the the epidemic of despair, what we now call depression in our society. It stems from this, not from mental illness, but from this. That you have millions of Americans that were led down a path. They said, well, come this way, don't go that way. Okay, that's the way that all of your ancestors went. That's the way that people for thousands of years went. Don't go that way, come this way instead. And all these people listened, and they said, okay, I'll go that way. And then one day they looked around and they said, well, where are we exactly? What's the point of this? Where were you taking us? We're just lost here now. We're stuck. So the people who are returning to traditional lives, who are making the radical decision to focus on their families and their marriages and so on, these are people simply deciding to live with some sense of direction, to live with meaning. Okay? That's what they're doing. They're not making some white supremacist radical political statement. They are reclaiming meaning in their lives. And they are certainly happier for it. That'll do it for this portion of the show. As we move over to the members block, hope to see you there. If not, talk to you on Monday. Godspeed.